There are many teams that believe they have a shot of winning the championship this year, but only one will prevail because for pretty much every one of these teams, there exists some flaw that could potentially be detrimental to their success. What are those flaws? Well, let's talk about it. Before I continue on with this video, if you end up enjoying it, please be sure to subscribe and drop a like to make sure the video does well in the YouTube algorithm. It is all much appreciated. There is going to be near daily playoff coverage as soon as the playoffs actually start. So now would be a good time to join the channel. I'm just going to go down a list of teams starting in the Eastern Conference in no particular order. All of these teams I would label as at least borderline contenders. If you don't think they're a contender, it is what it is, but I'm trying to cover more bases than not. The first team is the Cleveland Cavaliers, and if you watched the most recent video upload on this channel, you would know that the biggest flaw that exists with the Cleveland Cavaliers, at least in my opinion, is their perimeter defense. While their interior defense is impeccable, having Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell on the perimeter is not exactly ideal, and it could lead to teams that are more perimeter oriented, tearing them apart and kind of taking away the advantage they have in the interior. If Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen are consistently having to make up for the defensive mistakes of their team's guards, they're not going to be as impactful as if their team's guards just didn't make tons of defensive mistakes all the time. For the Sixers, they have a very similar issue, but actually I'm kind of torn between two issues, that being, again, perimeter defense and depth. When you go down the Sixers list of players that are actually playoff rotation quality, it's kind of a short list. You have your obvious core four with Tyrese Maxey, James Harden, Tobias Harris, and obviously Joel Embiid. But after that, do you really want to play Georges Niang a ton of minutes? De'Anthony Melton was horrible in the playoff for the Grizzlies last time he suited up in the postseason. They got rid of Matisse Thybulle, not that he was the answer. PJ Tucker's super old. There's just not a lot of great options. And then of course also, as mentioned, perimeter defense. Tyrese Maxey and James Harden are fine. I definitely say they're not nearly the liability that Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell are, but they're also not really big plus defenders, and this team in general really doesn't have significant plus defenders on the perimeter, so that's a concern. Usually you want to have at least one perimeter defender that you can really rely upon to give trouble to an opposing team's perimeter star. This team really doesn't have that. For the Celtics, their biggest issue to me is Jason Tatum's inconsistency. When it comes down to it, this roster is built about as perfectly as it can be, and it's just a matter of if Jason Tatum is going to consistently provide superstar level production. Of course, he was pretty excellent for most of the first 3 rounds of the NBA playoffs last year, and then absolutely stunk it up in the NBA Finals. Now, given that it's his first finals, he's still pretty young, I'm willing to let that slide, but at least in terms of what we can worry about with the Celtics, sometimes Jason Tatum does not show up. And if he doesn't show up enough times or at a perfectly consequential time, things can go wrong. And for the Milwaukee Bucks, as you'll notice in the thumbnail, I've kind of got nothing in terms of things that are an issue for them. Really, the only thing that I could find is they are the second worst free throw shooting team in the league. And of course, that is a bad problem to have. But one of the problems for these teams, some of the problems is just straight up defense or injuries. Something as small as free throw shooting isn't ultimately that consequential. It can make a difference, of course. Leaving points at the line is bad, but usually free throw percentage is not the determining factor of whether or not a team wins a championship. They're also top 10 in turnovers, but that's also just kind of what happens when you play at the pace that they do, so it's not a big deal. Moving over to the Western Conference, I believe the Bucks, Celtics, Sixers, and Cavs are the only contenders in the Eastern Conference. Sorry to the New York Knicks, but I don't see it. For the Denver Nuggets, it's Jokic's exploits on defense. The big problem that exists is that Jokic is right in the right context defensively, but there is definitely a very wrong context for him to be in defensively. And given the chess match of the NBA playoffs, teams are going to strategize to their max ability to force Jokic to be in those unideal situations. Last time we saw them in this situation, they were playing the Phoenix Suns, who absolutely mollywopped them. because Jokic just could not cover space, particularly having to step up or in the mid-range area. If he did step up, he'd give up a roll to the rim. Just was not pretty, and he got torn apart. But that's also a coaching thing and a team defense thing. If a player is exploitable, you have to work to hide those issues. Obviously, it's harder to do that with a center, but whether or not Mike Malone can actually mitigate that potential disadvantage is going to determine how far they go, frankly. For the Golden State Warriors, this one is quite obvious. It is an inability to win on the road. While I could point to Jordan Poole's inconsistencies, a lack of continuity, which is an issue for a lot of these teams, Andrew Wiggins being out, the biggest issue to me is they just can't win a freaking away game. I don't know what it is, but regardless of what they do, they have the third worst away record in the entire league, while having been tied for the third best home record. So Contender at home, terrible team away. It's like they're the 2012 Miami Heat at home and the 2013 Celtics, Charlotte Bobcats. Is 2013 the right year? Is that the year where they were terrible? Is it 2012? Whatever. For the Memphis Grizzlies, I'm going to go with Dillon Brooks' shot selection. Overall, for the last playoff run, Dillon Brooks shot below 35% from the field, and in the Warriors series, he shot 31% from the field, 32% from three, had multiple bad shots in bad moments, and many people suggested that he was the reason the series went as poorly for Memphis as it did, and I personally agree with that. While Dillon Brooks brings very good defense, and as much as you might hate it, his passion and shit-talking ultimately works in their favor for the most part. But the scoring, he takes too many damn shots. He takes too many bad shots. He thinks he's the hero way too often. And so long as that's going to happen in big moments, that's going to be a problem that you're going to have to hope you can overcome somewhere else. For the Sacramento Kings, they're definitely questionably in the contender category here. But of course, their big issue is defense. And frankly, the reason why many people will not label them as a contender is you really just simply cannot be the 22nd best defense in the league and be a championship team. It has happened before, I think, to be ranked that low, but it was like an exception, and it really never happens. And that team ended up turning it up in the playoffs anyways and were really good defensively then. So you just can't be a bad defense and win it at the highest level. You can be okay, not bad though. And the Kings are bad on defense. For the Phoenix Suns, Los Angeles Lakers, and Los Angeles Clippers, I have the same answer for all three, and that answer is continuity. What do I mean by continuity? I mean players being in and out of lineups. While teams that I mentioned before, like the Cavaliers and even a little bit the Memphis Grizzlies, injuries have hindered those teams from being at their fullest potential. But in the case of the Clippers, Suns, and Lakers, that has been to the max. And not only is that a concern for them having not built team chemistry over the year because of those issues, it's also a concern that any of their key players could get injured at any point. Obviously, in the case of the Clippers, they're not going to have Paul George in the postseason. Obviously, Kevin Durant had that freakish slip injury, but stuff like that just kind of happens to him now. That always happens with LeBron and AD. Injuries are a huge concern for a lot of teams in the Western Conference, particularly these teams that have been pretty disappointing in the regular season, as the Clippers and Lakers have been, and the Suns even to a little bit of an extent. But of course, we're talking about a completely different Phoenix Suns team from what we're dealing with right now. In the case of the Clippers, I think this will bite them the least because they have just simply had to deal with only having one of their stars on a consistent basis. They're constantly in and out of lineups. I think continuity is easily the biggest problem the Clippers have had over the past couple of years. In the case of the Los Angeles Lakers, while the team has been fantastic ever since the trade deadline because they became just a completely new team with that move, as I have said before, that trade is one of my favorite that I've ever seen and could go down as one of the better trades that we've ever seen just because of how much it changed the team. The actual talent acquired for what was given up wasn't the most crazy ratio ever, but the Lakers saved their season with one trade, and that's pretty remarkable. But they have also developed this chemistry and this winning formula without LeBron James because he got injured soon after the deadline, I believe, somewhere in that time frame and was not able to play with them. He's just now gotten back. He's only played a few games with D'Angelo Russell and Malik Beasley and Jared Vanderbilt, or Rui Hachimura even. So there is that concern for them that, like, how is the chemistry going to fit? Obviously, adding a 30-point, 7-assist guy that LeBron still somehow is ultimately a positive to your team's offense, but there will be some growing pains, and it will limit the potential of the roster from being the highest that it could be. Now, that's something that you could work through the postseason. I think that's possible for all three of these teams, that as the postseason goes along, you get a little bit more comfortable with each other and you're getting into the rhythm of things. It's not ideal to be getting into the rhythm of things as you're entering the belly of the beast, but it's better than not doing it at all. And in the case of the Phoenix Suns, obviously, just got Kevin Durant. He's only played a couple of games with them, and you don't really know what exactly everything's going to look like, but also, it is Kevin Durant. So I would still be feeling pretty good going into the postseason if I was a Suns fan. But yeah, that's the biggest issue I think every NBA contender has. Let me know if you agree or what you think your team's biggest issue is if you are a fan of a contender. I don't know such luxuries. The Bulls are not good and never will be, apparently. They've been good lately, but they're not a contender. So yeah, let me know what you think. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye. Why did I do finger guns?